Scripture Beer with another video, and whenever Rian Johnson talks about Star Wars or J.J. Abrams or any of these guys, I'm always very intrigued because every time they're interviewed, you get a little more. For some unknown reason, it's years later, and you get a little more instead of them just talking about this before. But anyway, whatever. He was interviewed by the Rolling Stone about his other shows, whatever that other one is that ended, and of course, because he did a Star Wars movie, they're going to ask him about it. But there is some interesting little things in here, even just from reading off of this first initial paragraph. With The Last Jedi, there was a popular conception that you and J.J. Abrams didn't really talk, which is why certain ideas get undone from one movie to the next. What was your actual level of communication with him? Now, for my part, I thought that they were just having a pissing contest. It wasn't so much they didn't talk, it was just, it felt like, as the viewer, when you're watching these movies, that they had both had totally different visions, and that to me was a problem. So yeah, it was less whether or not they communicated. I mean, obviously, if it's a pissing contest, you're probably not communicating all that much, but it was more they just seemed like they're totally on opposite ends of the spectrum. He says, we communicated, we met, and I spent days with him and was able to get into his head and all the choices he had made. That having been said, I communicated and I went and made the movie. And he was in the middle of Force Awakens. In other words, he was still working on it when Rian went and did his movie. Ultimately, I feel like the choices in it, none of them were born out of an intent to undo anything. They were all born out of the opposite intent of, how do I take this story that JJ wrote that I really loved and these characters he created that I really loved and take them to the next step? How can that be possible, though, Ryan? How is that possible? I'll give you an example. Snoke. How did Snoke move on to another step? He turned out to be nothing. We learned nothing about him. We didn't even understand his motivations at all. Like he was just there. He was just like an NPC Emperor replacement. And your movie was the movie with Snoke in it. Like, Snoke is in TFA, but he was kept kind of mysterious on purpose, right? Kind of like the Emperor in the OT, where he doesn't really come out until he comes out, and then he comes out in this, and then you just kill him off. So you sacrificed his character so Kylo could take the next step, which was simping for Rey. Ultimately. Or was it, Kylo was mad at him, or Kylo wanted to save Rey, or whatever the reason was. He didn't take a next step. Is killing Snoke in the way that he killed him really taking a next step either, though? I guess, I don't need my master anymore. In his mind, he might have been thinking he was taking things to the next step, but that doesn't mean it resonated on screen. I also don't see how Luke took another step. He regressed completely. Just because JJ put him on an island doesn't mean you have to write the reason he was there as you did. You didn't have to write him thinking about killing his nephew. You didn't even have to have him on the island the entire 20 or 30 years he was missing. You could have had him doing anything. I think that was stupid that JJ had him missing for that length of time. But you could have easily, had it that he had only been on the island for like a couple of months. He had been doing other things, something important during that time that other people didn't know about. But you didn't. There is some literature out there, I believe, that suggests that he was only there for a few years and that he was going around collecting artifacts before that. Okay, well, that turned out to not really be that important because he thought after collecting all those artifacts, the Jedi should be dead. Or they shouldn't exist. So it was just kind of stupid. And then in the end, Rey stole all that stuff. So everything you did execution-wise was horrible and didn't make any sense. When you had Kylo in the TIE fighter and he looks like he's going to kill Leia, he's going to shoot the ship and kill her, and he doesn't. But instead of having her not get killed, you had his side wing guys that were with him shoot and blow up the ship. And then instead of her dying, you had her float through space. in the most ridiculous thing ever. I don't know if any of this is making next steps. I don't know that Finn took a next step. Like, we see him wielding a lightsaber, which implies that he's probably, going to be some sort of force sensitive. The next step for him would have been growth in that area. And that was a JJ decision. So again, I don't see how that's a next step. I don't see how Hux took a next step. He just turned into a complete bumbling fool. When we first see him, he at least seems competent, and he seems like they're trying to make him kind of the new, not necessarily Tarkin, but a different, like at that level of importance and action and authority and wielding that authority. And then you literally turn him into like this goofy idiot, basically. And, that goofy idiot had to be replaced because he was made into a goofy idiot. Then they had to bring in General Pride. JJ had to bring him in. JJ had to backtrack on everything. Luke throwing the lightsaber. Why did Luke have to throw the lightsaber? That wasn't the next step. We knew what the next step was from the EU, and you wrecked that. You didn't have to throw the lightsaber. And then what did JJ have to do? He had to correct that by making Luke catch it, even though he's a Force Ghost, which is ridiculous. You also wrecked the Force Ghost thing. Like, come on. I don't know. I don't buy this. I don't buy it. I don't. I think he's full of crap. I think he just did whatever he wanted, and he just wanted to be controversial. Like he said, I want half the audience to hate it and half to love it. Which, when you're doing that with Star Wars, this isn't some artsy something you do in art school. So no. Anyways, sorry. I'll keep going here. I'm rambling. Kathy said we're looking at someone to do Empire to do the Empire Strikes Back of this series. I took that assignment very seriously, maybe more seriously than someone would have liked. I guess to me that didn't mean making something that just had nods to Empire. That meant trying to genuinely do what Empire did. But it has to come naturally. So what was the Empire moment? That Luke wasn't actually there? And he had a blue lightsaber that Ben literally just saw blow up instead of a green one. He had a blue one. Makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense. And how did that change Kylo's character whatsoever? Nothing. All you did was chastise him and make him even more mad. That's all Luke did. He didn't do the loving uncle thing. He did the I'm gonna make you even more mad. Oh man, I don't feel Empire about it at all. Out of nowhere, Snoke gets killed. Ooh, Empire. It's so controversial. We didn't even explain who he is and we killed him. And that doesn't mean he didn't take it seriously. I just think he sucks. It just wasn't the right person for that job. Again, trying to make half the people mad. In other words, he's just trying to make controversial stuff to make controversial stuff. What he did with Luke, he did just to be controversial. Because that's how he thinks you're supposed to do stuff. But just to use an example, The Force Awakens sets up Snoke as the big villain of the new trilogy with a mysterious backstory, and then midway through The Last Jedi, Kylo slices him in two and takes over the First Order. This will be interesting. That was in reading JJ's script and watching the dailies and seeing the power of Adam Driver's character. The interrogation scene in the first movie between Rey and Kylo was so incredibly powerful. Seeing this complicated villain that's been created, I was just so compelled by that. This is all a matter of perspective and phrasing, but to me, I didn't easily dispense with Snoke. I took great pains to use him in the most dramatically impactful way I could. If that's all you could do, the most you could do, bro, that's sad. Which was to then take Kylo's character to the next level and set him up as well as I possibly could. So that's exactly what I thought he was doing. And this is where JJ really screwed up in The Rise of Skywalker, because he did this. It was stupid to kill off Snoke the way he did and when he did it, and without any kind of proper explanation or him really defeating him. Because he kills him like in a way that was like, it's not like they dueled or something, or you know what I mean? He just kind of like tricked him. So he's the trickster guy, Kylo, and that wasn't really the way to do it. If you wanted him to move on to the next level and become Emperor, which is what he was supposed to be, and that was in Trevorrow's original The Rise of Skywalker, was that he does become the Emperor of the First Order, which is what should have happened when you killed off Snoke. You don't bring back Palpatine. However, it would have been a lot more impactful if Kylo actually did something to kill him that was like, that stretched him, that almost killed him, that, you know, that pushed him to the absolute brink, and then he comes through. You know, maybe you have Snoke, you know, having Rey like caged or like somewhere, you know, like he's using Rey to bait Kylo into fighting him, and Kylo just about dies, and then somehow comes through. That would be a lot more growth, and that would bring him to that status, as far as the audience is concerned, and even his character's concerned, a lot better than just trickstering and he's going to ignite his lightsaber and then just killing him off, like without anything, not knowing who Snoke even was, so the gravity of his death doesn't even really matter all that much. And then Kylo doing it in a trickster way, which also doesn't really make him grow in his dark sideness, really. It's just tricksty. So it was, again, as well as I possibly could, therein lies the problem. This was the wrong person to be doing a Star Wars movie. The fact that that's in his mind as well as he possibly could, and that's what he thinks character growth is, or people taking the next step, that's actually really sad. I guess it all comes down to your point of view, I thought. This is such a compelling and complicated villain. This is who it makes sense going forward to build around. Okay, but again, you don't have to pee on Snoke to have development for Kylo. And again, like I already said, the development was pathetic. It's the same way these guys thought about Rey and Luke, and same way he thought about Rey. The only way that I can elevate Rey is to make Luke a bum. You can make Snoke a cool, awesome villain that has something to add to the story other than just being tricked into being killed, and also have Kylo have growth. You can do both. You can have Luke go out an awesome hero, saving the day, and then passing the torch and having Rey become that main role, that main protagonist hero role as well. You can do both. It's not one or the other. And this is to me the biggest reason why this guy was the wrong guy for the job, because his whole mentality, and can you guys let me know in the comment section with all his like Knives Out and all these other shows and stuff he's done, does he do that in those shows? Does he kind of just sort of push people off to the wayside without really building on them and then having that climactic moment? Or does he do the opposite? Because as far as Star Wars is concerned, this was the wrong person for this job. This was a very, very bad choice by Kathleen Kennedy. Where did the idea for doing the holdo maneuver come from? Has anyone ever heard him explain where he got this idea from? Anybody? This is the first time hearing about this, and I've been waiting for this. Oh, Lord. It came from A New Hope. It was in my head when Han tells Luke that without the right calculations, they could fly into a star, and that'd end your trip real quick, wouldn't it? I thought, well, if that's physically possible, what would that look like? It seems like something that was low-hanging fruit to me in a way. But I knew that if we were going to use it, we have to use it in a very big way. This can't be a casual thing that happens this week. We should build the whole Return of the Jedi-esque 3 plot lines converging around this moment. Well, the reason it was low-lying fruit, though, and no one used it, is because of why they didn't use it. Right? It changes the whole thing. And the other thing that was, like, is then, just send droids up in ships and blow and send ships through other ships, right? Now, you can make the argument, well, if you start doing that, you're going to run out of ships. Agreed. That's the argument for not doing it. Or if you're going to do it, you do it seldom. But in the holdo maneuver's case, she goes through the main ship, and that somehow, like, sets off this weird, I don't even know how to describe it, energy explosion that takes out all the other Star Destroyers too, which doesn't make sense. And as he says here, he did this in a very big way. That was his very big way. It had to take out the whole fleet, which wouldn't make any sense. She's just hitting hyperspace at that second and flying a very, very short distance. It's not going to send some sonic boom across the whole thing and blow up all those other Star Destroyers. Like, that's dumb. Again, just the wrong, shouldn't have been there. But there we go. Now we know why. It was kind of a dumb thing, but whatever. In The Rise of Skywalker, there's a scene where someone asks why they don't just do the holdo maneuver with an unmanned ship. See, and this is where it feels like a pissing contest. Correct? And someone else says that's 1,000,000 to 1 shot that will never work again. So JJ was forced to put that in because we all were like, yeah, man, we might as well just do it. Keep doing it. There are a few other things like that in the film, including undoing the idea that Rey was a nobody, instead is Palpatine's granddaughter. When you saw the movie, and when you learned that they were doing some of those things, how did you feel about that? When I saw the movie, I had a great time watching it. Again, this is all about point of view. I never approached this as like a territory I'm carving out for my thing. In my perspective, JJ did the same thing with the third that I did with the second, which is not digging it up and undoing. Just telling the story the way that was most compelling going forward. That means not just validating what came before, but recontextualizing it and evolving and changing as the story moves forward. This is just a really like word salad-y way of saying, yeah, he tried to correct the crap I did. And he did it in a horrible way. And I guess, I'm assuming if JJ did all three, Rey would have been a somebody pretty early on, like in The Last Jedi. I didn't feel resentful in some way. See, the fact that he has to say that, I didn't feel resentful. What do you mean? No one said you did. Nobody said you did feel resentful, right? That sounds a little defensive. I think there was stuff going on with these guys. But you're talking about a movie made by my friends, with my friends in it. I sit down to watch a movie, and it's a Star Wars movie. It's all stuff I love. I'm not the one to come to for a hard-hitting critique. You can go to YouTube for that. In other words, he's not praising it, is he? He calls it recontextualizing. He doesn't say it's good, and then he says, I'm not the one for hard-hitting critique. So in other words, chances are he was probably not too thrilled, but he's not going to talk about it. He's not going to say anything. That's my take on that, whatever. Speaking of which, The Last Jedi was a big hit. It was critically acclaimed at the time, but because there's some subset of some unknown size that is really, really mad online about it, it's not an unknown size. It's a well-known size. It's like 80% probably. It's very well known. There's a reason all the Last Jedi toys were in the dollar store and the TFA toys were at Target. Not that the TFA was good. TFA was the beginning of the end. TFA was really bad in some ways when you really think about it. But no, we have very clear proof that the vast majority of people thought The Last Jedi sucked. Really mad about it, online about it, that then becomes the dominant narrative about the movie. No, it became the dominant narrative because it became the dominant narrative. It's being used in a college writing class of what not to do. What do you remember as that backlash was happening? How did you feel? How did that feel for you, to be witnessing it? In the moment, it's a complicated chain of reactions to it. It never feels good to have anybody coming after you on the internet, and especially coming after you, saying things that I think I very much do not agree with about a thing I made and put a lot of heart and soul into. But at the same time, having grown up a Star Wars fan ultimately let me contextualize it and feel at peace with it in many ways. Well, you're the one who wanted to divide. You said that's what you wanted. You wanted half the people to hate it and half the people to love it. Now, it turned out about 80% or more hated it, but, whatever. You kind of got what you wanted. Just remembering going back on one level to arguing on the playground about Star Wars as a kid. And I was in college when the prequels came out. My friends and I were prequel hate central. Interesting. So, just like those two guys, who's the guy that plays, he plays Scotty in the new Star Trek movies. Him and his buddy, the buddy did the voice of the droid in Andor. And he plays Unkar Plutt, and they hated the prequels. And yet they're cashing in on it. And like I said, I tweeted this. Imagine George Lucas watching these guys that like outwardly hated it and told everybody how much they hated it, what he did. And let's face it, the prequels were the most George Lucas of any of the movies. And now that I'm learning about the shooting scripts and stuff, like the prequels are the most George Lucas Star Wars there is. And he hated them? George must really love that he made a whole pile of money off of Star Wars. Everyone was ruthless at the time, and of course now the prequels are embraced. I'm not saying that as a facile, things will flip around in 20 years, you'll see. It's more that this push and pull and this hatred to stuff that seems new, this is all part of being a Star Wars fan. Culture war garbage aside, I think that essential part of it is a healthy part. Very diplomatic answer, Ryan. Very diplomatic answer. Can't really say much to that. I mean, that's pretty much it. What happened with the other Star Wars trilogy? There were talks of you doing. Nothing really happened with it. We had a great time working together, and they said, let's keep doing it. I said, great. I would kick ideas around with Kathy. The short version is Knives Out happened. I went off and made Knives Out and was off to the races, busy making murder mysteries. It's the sort of thing, if down the line there's an opportunity to do it or do something else in Star Wars, I would be thrilled. But right now I'm just doing my own stuff and pretty happy. Okay. How far did you get in terms of an idea? Was there a whole thing mapped out, at least, for what the first of those would be? It was all very conceptual. I made Knives Out fairly quickly. There was never any outline or treatment or anything. Are there certain kinds of movies? Yeah, whatever. Anyways. Okay, so there you go. I think ultimately, this is the wrong person for the job. Very much the wrong person for the job. They should have known he was the wrong person for the job. He hated the prequels. And again, I'm not saying you have to love the prequels to do a good Star Wars movie, but you can probably find somebody that can do a good Star Wars movie that also liked the prequels. Or at least thought they were okay. But you picked a guy who didn't like the prequels. You picked a guy who wanted to divide the fan base, thought that was the way to do things, and wanted to create controversy on screen for the sake of creating controversy. All the way back to the beginning, though, JJ started the ball rolling. TFA sucked. Rian Johnson had an opportunity to clarify things in TFA in a really good way. And things like, how was Rey doing all these things without ever being trained and all this stuff. It would have been difficult, and it still might not have been super well received. But if you could have thought of a proper way to explain that would have gone a long way. And if he really was a fan of Star Wars, when he watched TFA, he should have known right away as fans. We would have been like, whoa, how is she doing this? Like, this doesn't work. Sorry. But he didn't explain any of that in The Last Jedi. And then JJ had to shoehorn in Palpatine halfway through Rise of Skywalker, which was also terrible. It's all ultimately JJ's fault with that whole Rey being a Mary Sue thing from the beginning. But Rian didn't do anything to deflect that. He had just made it worse. There was just absolutely zero cohesion. These directors, I don't think, communicated all that much, to be honest. I think they did a little bit like you said at the beginning. And then that's it. And then they went off and did their own thing. The other thing, too, is as a fan, Rian Johnson should have listened to what Mark Hamill was saying of what he was doing with Luke. He could have changed that. He could have changed it any time. It sounds like he went pretty rigidly with his script, that his vision, what he wanted, and he wasn't really listening to anybody. It's kind of like, it's funny because he says he hated the prequels, but meanwhile, the same thing happened in the prequels. There was far fewer people trying to correct what George was trying to do and trying to fix it because they just didn't feel like they had the authority. Whereas in the originals, guys like Alec Guinness and even Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, they were vocal. And there were lots of other people that were vocal as well. His wife, other people on set. Kirshner talks about Empire and the different debates they would have. So it's ironic that he didn't like the prequels and most people hate Last Jedi, and kind of a similar thing happened. So he became that which he despised or didn't like. Isn't that funny how that all works out? But wrong guy for the job. Shouldn't have been doing it. He go do your murder mysteries or whatever you're doing. Apparently people say they're good. Do those. Don't do Star Wars. Don't hire people like this for Star Wars. Find somebody that knows how to write fantasy adventures, but also understands Star Wars and understands the characters in Star Wars. I have no idea for the life of me how you could have possibly watched the original trilogy as a so-called fan and thought that the way you portrayed Luke in The Last Jedi made any sense. That is not a fan. That is some guy who's just trying to create controversy and get people talking. And you buried the Star Wars brand with what you did with that, more than anything that JJ did. That was the biggest, worst mistake ever in this IP. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comment section what you think. If you like this content, please like, subscribe. Always helps the channel. Feel free to check out anything else on my channel. Have yourselves a really good day.